Thank you for coming. I'll call this meeting to order. This is Town Council, Alpine Town Council work session for October 1st. The time is 7:02. Tonight, our main topic is the air park, so thank you everyone for coming. We have a few people that are going to say some remarks. Angela and then Raj, and then we have the fire chief is going to say a few things, and then we'll open it up to public comment. I just want to make sure that everyone keeps in mind that we all live here, and please be civil, and I don't anticipate anything getting out of control, but if it does, we're going to sick Emily on them, so watch out. We don't want any craziness. But with that being said, I will invite Angela to come up to give us our first comments, and Monica will turn on the mic.
Thank you. I'm Angela Kinn, Angela Brogy Kinn, according to the agenda. I'm speaking on behalf of a concerned citizens coalition regarding the air park. Thank you, Mayor and Town Council, for hosting this discussion and for taking our concerns seriously. We know that the town of Alpine has no jurisdiction over the air park neighborhood or the actual airport. This is, however, an issue that affects all residents of Alpine and surrounding neighborhoods. Thanks to airport managers Lynn and Raj for starting this process. We'd like to start with a short background of our group and recap our concerns that were relayed to the Air Park HOA most recently on July 1st of 2024. Members of our group have been in contact with airport managers and air park representatives for over 4 years. Lynn, the current airport manager, suggested that we put our concerns in writing and he would take them to the air park HOA meeting, which occurs every July. So we submitted that email on July 1st. We have provided copies of that email and the list of questions we submitted in case anyone attending would like to read those. We want to be clear that our concerns are long-standing and did not originate with the tragic accident on July 4th of this year and are not strictly related to the 4th of July holiday, but to everyday occurrences throughout the year. Raj replied to our email, and he asked the town to host this meeting to start the channels of communication between the airport management and its neighbors. Our concerns fall into two basic categories: safety and quality of life and noise concerns. Some of our safety concerns are low-flying aircraft, including planes and helicopters, over homes and businesses, adds extra risk to the community in the event of a crash. Low flying includes multiple reports of aircraft performing touch-and-go maneuvers. Current standards set by the air park state avoid low-level flight over the city or east of the runway, and touch-and-goes are prohibited. An additional concern is aircraft flying out of the standard flight path may also increase the risk of a crash in a populated area. The standard flight path is outlined as, weather permitting, landing runway 13, which translates to landing from the northwest over the BLM or the unpopulated lake bed. Additionally, we were disturbed to learn that some aircraft require a parachute to land safely on the runway. Our next concern is overshooting of the runway to the south onto County Road 100, adjacent to the neighborhood. We're also concerned with how close jet fuel may be stored to residential homes, how it's transported, and what type of oversight is provided. A question we have is, what is the emergency plan for a jet fuel fire or crash on land, and who is responsible for enacting that plan? Is the Alpine Fire Department routinely trained and properly equipped for this type of fire or accident? We are also concerned with the liability of pilots to ensure that any damage to life or property will be covered and paid for. Is liability insurance required for pilots? Our final safety concern is that there is a purported acrobatic flight school running out of our airport. Our second category of concern is quality of life and noise issues. The disruptive noise levels generated by the frequent takeoffs, landings, and low flying of private jets and helicopters not only disturb our way of life, but also affect our ability to enjoy our homes and outdoor spaces peacefully. We all live here to enjoy the outdoors. For those neighborhoods closest to the airport, the noise from these aircraft often exceeds tolerable levels, especially during early morning and late evening hours. In conclusion, we want to be good neighbors, and we want the air park to be good neighbors to us. We appreciate the air park's guidelines for pilots, and we would like to see them enforced. We're concerned because we observe pilots routinely violating these rules and guidelines, including flying out of the designated flight path, not respecting dusk to dawn hours, and flying low and in circles over town and neighborhoods. At what point is this airport at its max traffic capacity as an unmonitored rural airport using public land? Being a good neighbor to us would mean the airport management creating an easily accessible way for neighbors to submit complaints, continuing to respond to those complaints, and providing transparency to local citizens on type and number of complaints. In addition, being a good neighbor also means establishing a plan for guideline enforcement and sharing that plan and its efficacy publicly. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thanks, Angela. Angela's a teacher, if you didn't know, so she's very good at speaking in public, so we could all take some lessons from her. But anyways, thank you, Angela. Raj, I'll give you the helm, and I've got your presentation here, and just tell me when you want me to change the slide. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Mayor, Council. This has, I will agree with Angela, has been long overdue for us to come in and present on behalf of the air park and have an open dialogue on some of these issues. And I'll do my best to try to answer a few of the questions. And as most people know, I've been on the board of the air park for a few years now, been president for a couple of years. I have tried, from a community perspective and an air park perspective, to answer and respond to every single email, every single question, and do it in a very factual manner. Standards for airports, standards for pilots and aircraft operations are quite intricate, and I don't want to get into the whole FAA regulation side of it, but I do want to tell you a little bit about what the airport is doing to be a good neighbor. It is, in every airport in the United States, extremely important, and we see it all across the country, how important it is for us to cohabitate safely and properly with our community. And as the air park and as the president of the air park board and representing 90 or so members, we want to do the same thing. We want to be good members. We want to be good partners. We want to have safe operations. We want to be good community partners. And so that's our objective. That's what we're trying to do. Like many of you that love the outdoors, the folks that are members of the air park love the outdoors, love flying airplanes, love being able to come up here and want to work hard to work with the community and be good citizens and stewards of this wonderful area of Alpine. So we go to the next slide. So a couple comments about aircraft safety operations. Alpine Air Park, which is 50 or so years old now, was designed and put into place as opposed to the original runway east of the air park with safety in mind. And the reason that was done was to try to avoid issues, conflicts, noise, traffic pattern operations with residential and city areas. And so the circles there kind of represent the areas to the north and the west of the field that aircraft operations, that we try to encourage aircraft operations to operate in to prevent to deconflict some of the areas around the city. One of the comments that Angela made earlier, the air park does not regulate aircraft operation traffic patterns. Okay, that's an FAA regulation. The airspace in the air park fall under the rules of the FAA. Pilots can operate within those guidelines, and so while we as the air park can make recommendations, which we do, which we encourage every member in the air park to follow, I cannot go out and enforce to a pilot some specific rule or some specific overflight operation if they're following their standards and their guidelines. The other thing that people should know, and what most people don't know about Alpine Air Park, anybody in the United States can fly into Alpine Air Park, and that is partially by design. One of the unique things about Alpine as a city as it's grown is that to have the capability of emergency medical services, EMS aircraft, helicopters, to have fire rescue, to have forestry service, to have Coast Guard, the U.S. Army, the Guard, have a place to come in and have operations to support this community. If there was a fire, if there's a medical issue, you got to have an airport. You got to have an air park, and you got to have fuel services. And so what Alpine Air Park does is provide a hugely valuable service to those agencies to be able to use, and they do use them in any need. And a couple of the complaints that we got from some members earlier this year, for example, helicopter operations, we went out and looked, and we found out that it was EMS operating a helicopter at night, taking some operation or some person to the hospital. EMS has rights of access to any airport in the United States. They can land pretty much wherever they want, and we, as good neighbors to EMS, Crash Fire Rescue, to the Coast Guard, to DoD, we want to support those activities. We want to provide that availability to the community. If there's a fire in the hills, we want forestry service and fire to be able to get to stopping that fire. And so that's a really key point about Alpine Air Park, is that it's public use. The other part of it is, while there are members at Alpine, there are a lot of folks that can fly into Alpine that we have no idea who they are. We have no way to control it. It's an open, non-controlled towered airport. We can make recommendations. We can broadcast on the radio preferred traffic operations, which we do. We try to encourage pilots to follow certain rules, those blue circle areas of approach that I'm talking about, but we cannot enforce, and I cannot force any pilot to follow a certain flight path, especially since it's a public use airport, and I have no idea who's coming into the airport. So just want to make sure everybody understands that. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things that we've also been doing, working with the board, is to encourage pilots to brief every July at our annual meeting best practices, right? So we've got 90 or so members. They've got, let's assume a couple hundred airplanes, and they're flying in. What we're trying to do is limit their operations and encourage what we call good noise and safety practices. Most airports across the country in densely populated areas have those operations. They encourage some type of procedure. We're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to limit touch and go operations. We're trying to limit low-level approaches, and we're trying to limit the type of operations that would cause conflict from a noise perspective at the airport. And the region that we're showing you there, the noise-sensitive areas, is what we're trying to do as a board, working with members to encourage good operations at Alpine, so that the city and the community at large understand that we're doing our part to be good stewards of the community and keep noise levels to a minimum.
Is that supposed to say not?
Say again?
Aircraft are to fly below 7,500 feet in less landing?
Not, sorry, yeah, apologize, yeah. Next one. You can go to the next one, Mayor. So the circle, the yellow circle is about pattern work. Again, we can encourage our members not to do pattern work and touch and goes at the air park, but I cannot stop random airplanes coming in from any other airport in the United States and doing pattern work. We can only encourage them, but that's not recommended at Alpine. I just want to make sure everybody's clear. The air park at large, the airport and the board has no enforcement mechanism. And most airports in the United States have no enforcement mechanism. That goes to the FAA. So if a pilot flies an airplane outside of FAA regulations, that's an FAA pilot issue. That's not an airport issue. Next. And then the right downwind departure for you pilots in the room, for the community at large. If you're taking off to the north, we encourage people to make left turnouts and go over the water and make their southbound departure, or go north, and to avoid a right turnout, which would place them directly over the city and residential areas. That's what most of us do. I do it all the time when I'm flying, and that will prevent noise at any time of the day any kind of conflict with noise and operations, and of course, the safety issue, if there is an issue, try to restrict that.
Doesn't it also depend on the wind direction and things like
It
that?
does.
Okay.
So most of the time, most of the year, we prefer to land to the south, and that is the preferred landing configuration. I came in here a couple of days ago. The winds were actually favoring landing to the north. It's about 10 knots. Within my operations of my aircraft, I can accept that and still land to the south and prevent a north landing. That's what I did. Not every airplane is the same. Tail dragger aircraft have different standards and different requirements. They generally do not want a tailwind when they're landing, so they may have to opt to land to the north. However, the preferred approach is from the reservoir landing to the south, and that's what we try to encourage everybody to do within their safety paradigm.
Right.
You know, certain aircraft operations, runway length, distances, we have limits of what we can do. So,
Thanks.
yeah, thanks. And then helicopter operations. So what has become popular, and a couple of the emails that I got this year related to helicopter operations, we have formed a helicopter committee. We are trying to encourage safe and practical helicopter operations, ways to depart Alpine, ways to enter Alpine. Helicopters, again, like fixed-wing aircraft, have several different rules and requirements. They can fly lower. They can fly in and around areas that are different to fixed-wing aircraft. And the FAA controls that regulation through helicopter operations. But what we're trying to do with our helicopter committee is come up with standards and guidelines for members to say, hey, let's be good neighbors, let's be good stewards of the community. If you're going to fly your helicopter, which is fine, go this way. Don't go right over the city. Try to do this departure, try to do this arrival. That's what we're trying to do. We formed a helicopter committee after a couple of those complaints. We've had a team getting together to come up with standard practices that we can encourage everybody in how best to operate to keep the noise to a minimum.
Next.
Yeah. And then proper procedures for taking off to the north. Again, that is the preferred departure at Alpine, and you can see the yellow lines. That's what's supposed to be what we encourage, which is a straight out north departure, or left turn to the south, or to the west. That is what you see, the predominant amount of departures out of Alpine. That is mostly what you will see. Conditions, you know, as long as the weather conditions and the wind conditions can tolerate.
Is this open to questions?
We'll get to questions. Sorry. We wanted to give him a chance to.
And I want to, Angela brought up a couple points.
Yeah.
I want to just answer a couple of those questions because they're regulatory requirements in nature. And so I want to finish this and I'll
Sure.
answer a few of those
Yeah,
questions.
and then maybe town council will have some questions, and then if you don't mind, you'll field some questions
Sure.
from the audience. Okay, great. Ready for the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should be the last one. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have a helicopter safe operating procedures committee. They're actively working by the end of this year to come up with some standards that we can kind of put into place for members and communicate to friends of members that want to fly into Alpine, fly into the air park, and that will help encourage proper operations, deconfliction with the town, and then encourage some noise sensitive ways to get in and out of the air park so that we can be courteous to the town and courteous to people in the air park. And that is part of our mission and charter and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, a couple things I've talked about. I have tried, including the email that was sent to me, to respond to every single email, question, concern on any kind of traffic or noise issue. I'll do my best to do that. Our operations at Alpine, when you look at Afton, Driggs, are actually quite low. Our frequency of operations is nowhere near as high as Afton and Driggs. And so our population of flights, especially outside of the July 4th week window, is pretty low. And so, but I will try to respond to every single email. And the board wants to be responsive and wants to be communicative with everybody. The question about safe landing and parachutes. Certain aircraft require parachutes for aerobatic operations. That is not a condition for safe landing. That is a condition for practicing aerobatics when those folks are practicing aerobatics in the air. So those parachutes are not required for the aircraft to land, have no bearing on the aircraft safety, have no bearing on aircraft certification or design. There are multiple aircraft at Alpine where if the pilot wants to go out and practice aerobatics in an aerobatics area or an area of his or her choosing, they have to wear a parachute. That's an FAA requirement. It has nothing to do with the airplane being able to safely land at Alpine, and has no bearing on de-risking the safety of the aircraft because there's a parachute in the airplane. There are airplanes certified by the FAA that do have parachutes built into the airplanes. Those are safety features that are just part of normal aircraft. Those aircraft, Cirrus is the big parachute installed airplane across the country. They fly into every single airport out in the United States. That parachute is a safety function and a safety feature that was part of its original design. So nothing to do with the landing safety of the aircraft. Insurance. The insurance guidelines for aircraft and operations are up to the pilot and up to the lien holder or up to the bank that owns the airplane, if somebody owns the airplane. There is not a mandate for insurance for any aircraft. So there are pilots that take insurance, hull insurance on the airplane, and general liability insurance. There are pilots that can opt out of taking insurance. That is up to the pilot, and that is not regulated by the FAA. That is a commercial decision the pilot makes, based on his or her preference and how they want to do that. So the airport has its own general liability insurance policy that protects the airport from any issues that may happen at the airport for operations or incidents, things like that. Commercial operations, the airport and the members cannot, by charter and by our rules, have commercial operations at the airport. So there are no flight schools at Alpine Airpark. There are no aerobatic schools at Alpine Airpark. There are aerobatic operations that may happen at different times of the year. Pilots can go up and perform aerobatics over the reservoir within their guidelines, but there is not a school at Alpine that is doing commercial for-hire operations for either aerobatics or any kind of training. And when that issue pops up, we address it as a board, and we make sure people understand we don't authorize commercial operations at Alpine. That's one thing we can do through our membership and our operating agreement and our charter, is we can restrict that type of an operation. So we don't allow charter operators to fly in and out of, to operate out of Alpine. They may fly into Alpine to drop a passenger off, but they cannot have a functioning charter airline or airline operation out of Alpine. Cannot have a flight school, cannot have an aerobatic school. Those things are not authorized, and the board would never approve that type of activity out of Alpine. Let's see, public use, I've talked about that. Again, probably to the community at large, the non-aviators, one of the biggest values Alpine Air Park offers, besides having 90 or so members here that really care about this community as much as everybody else in Alpine does and wants to be a part of it and share this community, is the fact that this airport is public use. If you, a family member, a friend gets hurt doing whatever you're doing and enjoying the outdoors, you are going to want an airport to get EMS here, to get them on a helicopter and get them out of here and get them to a hospital and save their life or help them, and that is super important. And that includes fire rescue. I've talked to the Forestry Service. They also have helicopter operations and can use Alpine Air Park. That is just one of the biggest assets that the air park offers, to have that capability in the city where there's no other airports around. And then the one comment about jet fuel. For those folks that don't know, jet fuel, which is the largest thing that commodity that we consume from a fuel resource at Alpine, is generally not anywhere near as flammable as automotive gas. It's quite actually not flammable unless you set up a certain type of ignition sequence. However, our jet fuel storage, our jet fuel operations, our fueling operations are all regulated by the state of Wyoming. We go through safety, certification, and standards every year and ongoing to ensure that the way we store it, the way we pump it, the way we handle it, the way it comes in and the way it goes out into airplanes is all controlled and regulated. And so we're pretty actively involved in the safety side of handling jet fuel. And avgas, which is more flammable than jet fuel, which aircraft at Alpine do use, same rules apply. All those safety rules and the requirements for the environment are regulated by the state, and we have to comply with those requirements.
And where is it stored?
It's stored at the main ramp at the south end of the runway.
Okay.
In approved storage containers, again, audited, certified, filter checked, all the regulatory compliance requirements have to be met because we're a public use airport.
Yeah. And some individual homeowners or people that have hangars may store their own gas in their own.
They may, but the quantities are so minimal that they would not pose a risk to the community at large.
Okay.
You got to think about it. Aircraft, by their very nature, store fuel.
A lot of
So
fuel.
a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
And so there are aircraft and hangars storing fuel as much as a certified container is storing fuel, and you have the same, as long as they're designed appropriately, they can have that fuel storage. So,
Okay.
that's it. That's all I have.
Well, thank you so much. I applaud you for coming in.
Sure.
Definitely. and being open and willing to, accept comments and one thing that we talked about when we met before was you were thinking about being a part of or setting up a concerned committee or working with a committee of concerned citizens. Where does
Sure.
that stand?
Well, I mean, what I've done in the last, or since July 4th, is basically try to respond and engage anybody in the community. In terms of having an established person, I am happy to have a representative and have a dialogue with whoever you want to establish from the community at large, with myself. I've dealt with these issues at different airports around the country, and so I think I'm happy to do that and set that.
Yeah.
And however we want to do that vehicle, I'm not sure what the best way is, but I'm here and I'm easy to reach.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be the mechanism, I guess, will help bring the two people together,
Sure.
the two groups together, but, I mean, I don't know if anyone's willing to sit on the committee, but we'll figure out the next steps on that, and we'll work with Wendy and Angela and the rest of the group. And, yeah, we'll take the next steps on that, but, yeah, really, thank you for your willingness to work with the group.
Happy to do it.
Have you had conversations with the hospital about them putting a helipad over there, or have you engaged them in any conversations?
Have not, but that's a great point. I do know that EMS operations are coming in and out of Alpine. I don't know the flavor and who the engagement, and if it's the hospital, where that's all coming from.
Yeah.
So no, that's a great point to bring up.
I do recall a discussion we had, I can't remember what the topic was last year, regarding Alpine Meadows and them having they wouldn't allow people to fly into the, or have a helipad at the hospital. There was some discussion about that, and everyone here that lived in Alpine Meadows, like, oh, we don't care, land there if it's gonna save a life, like,
Sure.
might as well. So it sounds like, obviously, you would have no problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to kind of figure out how to construct it and design it in a way that's beneficial. And of course, I'm one person on the airpark board. I've got to go to the members and tell them what we're doing and how we're doing it and why it's important. But I think that would be beneficial to the community.
Okay. That's definitely something that
Yeah.
I will work with you on. One other question I had, what are the airpark growth plans? Like, how much more can you grow? How many more airplane can you accept,
Well-
in hangars and whatnot?
Good question. I can't, and the airplane side of it, as I mentioned, from a frequency of operations, we are at the very low end spectrum compared to Afton and Driggs, which is the comparable I
Right.
always try to make. I would say we're probably 20%, 25% in terms of frequency of operations. From a hangar perspective, we're pretty much built out. This year, we approved one other joinder of a large parcel of land on the north side of the runway, but it has a 3-hangar limit on that 17-acre piece of property, and that's pretty much built out from the airpark. There's just not a physical way with the property to have additional joinders come in. And I think, this is my opinion, I think most of the airpark pretty much feels we're membered out or joined out from that perspective. Could you, in theory, start running taxiways across roads and doing all these other things? You could. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it would be overwhelmingly difficult for it to happen, and I don't think the airpark in general and the membership wants to go that way. So for the most part, we're 99% built out.
Okay. Any questions from town council? And then we'll, if you don't mind, we'll open it up
Sure.
to anyone else.
No, I had just wanted to understand more about the public airport, because when I had reached out to Lynn a few times in the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of the helicopters that I had seen were actually Forest Service.
Right.
Or they were charters that were coming in. So I appreciate you being able to explain that, because yes, you perhaps don't have a lot of control over how they maneuver.
Well, I spoke to the Forestry Service. Obviously, we're engaged with them. One of the things I did want to mention relative to safety, and you brought it up, so I'll mention it now. Obviously, the Forestry Service is involved. They provide a lease of land to the north, 1,600 feet of our runway. Forestry Service can use Alpine Airpark at their whim to come in, and they do. They have helicopter operations that stop and get fuel, and they can do that at their convenience, right? But one of the things people need to understand, there was a point mentioned about the south end of the runway and landing operations, right? So there's a concern about runway overrun. Or end of runway overrun, landing to the south. Well, things to consider. If we don't have that extra 1,600 feet, if we don't have that safety margin, as I call it, you have a higher risk of safety of having an end of runway overrun at the south end. And so having that 1,600 feet, having the ability for aircraft to be able to land with lots of margin and stop is a huge valuable asset to safe operations at the air park. And talking to the Forestry Service, and part of the original design of the air park, long before I got there, was to have some of that margin to prevent a south end exit of an aircraft and cause any issues on the south end. So,
One other thing I wanted to point out, all these yellow lines,
yeah.
clarify me if I'm saying this wrong, but this is showing actual aircraft that,
That's aircraft track.
right.
Yes.
So every plane that's in the area that's landing there, you can track it and you could actually look up,
Actually, the public can track it.
right,
Okay,
an app.
it's open to the public.
Right.
Every aircraft has to have an ADS-B transponder, public can track it, that's an FAA mandate. And so we are using it as a tool for, here are best practices for in and out of Alpine.
right. And so I kind of envisioned that the committee, someone from the public has a complaint, they say at 7:33 on such and such date, a low-flying airplane came in and landed to the north or whatever, and then you, the committee, whomever, the airport operations would be able to go out and look and see who that pilot was or what aircraft it was. Am I mistaken in that?
We certainly can look at the aircraft operations and go, hey, just a reminder, if we know who it is,
Right.
hey, here are the best
Right.
practices operations procedures.
Right,
That-
and just a
that's the
reminder
intent.
and
Yeah.
things like that. And
It
then-
it is by rule, by FAA rule, not meant to be an enforcement mechanism and not meant to beat the pilot over the head about what he or she didn't
Right.
do correctly. It's meant for us, it's meant to be a tool to go, best practices.
Right. But if there was some really bad landing or some event that happened and someone could just go and track it
Sure.
on whatever the app is
Sure.
or the website, yeah. So I think that's, any other questions up here?
Just on best practices, I assume that there is a pretty standard app for pilots, that if you're coming into a foreign airport, that it'll have best practices on there?
Well, not best practices, but the airport flight directory has guidance for preferred traffic patterns, preferred runways, guidance that a pilot can read and go, here is the traffic patterns for every runway. That's universal across the United States for most airports, especially of this size.
And this
Let's
is
see.
on all those apps?
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And then also, as an HOA, be it your HOA or the other HOAs, do you require your HOA residents to hold liability insurance on their aircraft?
We do not.
So if a plane is owned outright, you don't have to have insurance?
You do not. That's a national rule, and that's at the discretion of the pilot and the owner operator. Most pilots, I will say, given the value of the asset and the risk
Yeah.
involved, generally have their own liability insurance. That's for the aircraft itself. The air park maintains its own general liability policy for aircraft operations.
Is that standard practice at all throughout the nation as far as HOA members requiring their members to have?
I am not aware of any, and I don't know this to be 100% true, of any HOA or any air park, private or public use, that mandates general liability insurance for aircraft operations, especially since we are non-commercial. We're private use only airport. For the membership side of it, we don't allow members to have a charter operation, for example, flying in and out of the airport.
Any other questions up here?
I kind of have a comment more than anything, I guess. I've lived here for over 20 years. I've seen a lot of growth, greatly increased air traffic over my neighborhood, which is right off Grays River Road, over time. Sometimes it's startling how low they're flying, and I understand that you guys can't regulate that. That's the FAA. I feel like there's no easy answer because we won't get to a place probably for a considerable amount of time where there's more regulation. So we just really, that we would like to see, but I just don't think that's probably going to happen. So we just need to try and foster this relationship and work together to get everybody on the same page.
I would agree. I mean, I think everybody in Wyoming, certainly I've learned this over the last few years I've been here, is by their nature very anti-regulatory and don't need more regulations. Pilots already in operations are hugely regulated by all kinds of things that are required. And so that's the reason I'm standing here, is to try to develop a protocol for us to have positive interaction and do it outside of, having an additional regulation or additional rule.
So we
I live
definitely
near
need to problem
Andrea,
solve.
and I'll agree with her. A lot of helicopter traffic, and it's low, and it's loud, and it's going right up the grays, so,
Yeah, definitely commend you
Yeah.
on getting a helicopter thing going, because,
a lot of helicopter stuff.
and it's not all EMS or Forest Service.
Sure,
I've watched
no.
them go, and I know EMS and I know
Sure.
Forest Service.
Yeah.
So, Raj, if you don't mind, I'd like to just, if we just start yelling out questions to Raj, people at home won't hear it. So maybe let's see how it goes, and then I'll make sure I get the question so people at home can hear it, and then you can answer. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Dan Harry, I live in Old Alpine, right across the street from And I've talked to Lynn several times. We've had some issues with low-flying aircraft, helicopter flying all over the place. If I give him the exact time of the offending craft, and I know you can't enforce it, but you can talk to
Sure.
pilots, especially if they're members. He tells me that he doesn't know who it is unless I can get a tail number. I can't get out in my yard with my binoculars, and I've tried, to get the tail number of a craft. It just is not going to happen, even as low as they're flying. So if you could make that more cooperative, if someone reports something, gives you an exact time, that you could then talk to the pilot, especially if they're a member, that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think,
Right now, I feel very helpless when, oh, well, you don't have the tail number? Sorry, nothing we can do.
I'm not going to repeat that question, but
I can respond to it.
Yes,
I mean,
please.
That's the whole point of the helicopter committee, and that's the whole point of us trying to get members informed and members' friends that want to fly helicopters in on best practices, because you are correct. Unless you get the tail number, we have no way to know, and,
But you said you can track it. You do track it.
well,
well,
you can do it too.
yeah.
Well, yeah, but
Problem
you
is,
guys are doing it all the time.
Well,
I don't know, I'm not gonna track all this crap.
the way in which we're approaching it is, we formed the committee, we're gonna go out and brief everybody. I'm trying not to make a phone call to every pilot 3 times a day to go beat them over the head about what they're supposed to be doing and what they didn't do, because then I turn into an enforcement organization and simply don't have the resource to do it. What I'm trying to do is, hey, folks, this is the way we want to behave and operate as good community partners. That's the way we're trying to do it. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Am I going to have an outlier? Absolutely. But that's what we're trying to do, to allay your concerns.
Raj, do you know the website where just citizens can track? Do you know what it is, or off the top of your head?
I don't, because I actually have never, I don't
You haven't had to do that?
go
Okay.
out and do that.
I think what we'll do is we'll figure out what that is, and then we'll post it so everyone out there has an opportunity if they would like to track. I think it's as simple as either downloading an app or so. Okay, go ahead.
Called Flight Aware.
Flight Aware. Okay.
Yeah,
And it
but-
gives you the tail number and the registration, and you can see the flight pattern.
Flightaware.com, I'm assuming, or whatever. Google that.
Just keep in mind, it does not give you the pilot operating the helicopter or the airplane.
Right.
That's the only challenge.
So let's try this. If you don't mind coming up to the microphone so people can at home.
Question's very short.
Okay, go for it.
Are you currently logging complaints or comments that come in, email and phone?
I am personally, yes, because I'm dealing with all of them.
Okay.
I'm trying,
Logged.
Lynn's the airport manager and does a wonderful job managing our airport, but his job is the execution side of keeping a safe and functioning runway, which is super important to safety. It's my job to deal with the complaints and deal with the who and the what and the how. And so I've kind of asked Lynn to just defer that to me. Me and Kent Mazia, who's not here, he's one of the other board members. We are the operations side of it, trying to look at those complaints. And yes, we're tracking it and logging it, and I'm trying to be responsive to every single, and if I haven't been responsive, I apologize, but I believe I responded to every single person that's reached out to me this
Do you
year.
register contact?
Sure.
I see Lynn's there printed on the door.
Sure.
Okay.
I will make sure my contact information is provided on our website.
Any other questions? Jack, go ahead.
I just have a quick one, sir. I was just curious, what's the limit, the height or the
Well, I mean, that's generally pilot determined. I mean, if they're landing or taking off, there is no limit.
Yeah, they're going all the way down the lake, all the way down to, you know, down to,
Yeah, so helicopters have different rules, and I would be, I don't want to quote you on the rules, because they're a little bit different than fixed wing. For the lake, when there's no persons or property, there's no limit requirement.
People on boats, and that's not personal property, if you're on a boat and.
I don't know the technical definition of what the density of personal property is, so I don't want to misquote, I don't want to be misquoted.
So you said there's no limit for helicopters, what about for planes?
There is a limit for airplanes over densely populated areas. I'll have to look at I'll have to look
Only
through it.
densely.
I believe it's 500 feet. I haven't had to pay attention to that rule in many years, because I don't go 500 feet over houses, so.
Okay, that'll be interesting to see.
Go ahead.
What is your protocol for dealing with constant abusers of your rules?
What is my protocol? Well, the only protocol that I have is to be able to reach out to the members, reach out to the folks, if I know who they are, and have a dialogue with them about, hey, this is what you should be doing, these are best practices. That's the only protocol I have. I have no enforcement ability, because ultimately, if they're flying their airplane within FAA regulations, I can't do anything about it.
Okay, and one more question. Are you obligated to do an air quality test by the FAA, the state, for the jet fuel,
When you say air quality,
to measure the air quality?
no, that is not. The issue that has to be determined with Wyoming state law is leaks, is proper storage, filtration, and to make sure the jet fuel doesn't get into the groundwater and get into ground supply. Those are the big concerns.
So in a residential neighborhood, there's nothing about testing the air quality from the jet fuel?
That's correct. And
Because it is really bad. I live right across the street from your new hangar, and it is bad.
well, there's no jet fuel in my new hangar.
No, it's from those, special.
Oh, it's from the airplane.
Sits there, and for an hour,
Yeah.
warming up, I mean, you have to go in the house, and it makes you so nauseous.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what that's doing to the air.
Well, there's a couple reasons why the aircraft could be sitting there. If it's a piston engine airplane, they're doing a MAG run-up check on their airplane to make sure the engine's going to work as designed when they take off. If it's a jet or a turboprop, they're probably, in most cases, either waiting to call up for a clearance with ATC so they can take off and pick up a clearance. I don't think they should be there more than 5 to 10 minutes. I don't think. I wouldn't know why you would want to be sitting there burning jet
Burning
fuel,
jet fuel, yeah.
Right.
you know, for more than.
I don't either, but that V3 that comes in
Yeah.
is really.
So I'm going to open it up to public comment here in a few minutes after we have a chance. But is there any more questions for Raj?
So let me just answer the air quality question. So the FAA certification standards for aircraft, there are 2 big certification standards. That regulates how aircraft are certified, and air quality for the exhaust of a jet airplane is not a regulation or a regulatory requirement for almost any aircraft that I'm aware of.
Wendy?
I have a direct question. I didn't want to call anyone out by name, but are you aware that I could purchase today, based on a 46U, a flight instruction in my own aircraft for 8 hours for $1,400?
Well, so send me a note on where you got that information, and I will address it. I will address it. So,
Aerobatic, advertised as an aerobatic plane.
so
Okay, in the back, please, Heather.
I have 2 questions. One is, you talked about you can't charter out of the airport. Do you know if you can, if they can charter a heli skiing out of the airport?
So what I said was you can't have a
Raj,
fixed.
I'm sorry, can we kind of keep it down a little bit? I'm getting texts from folks who are listening or watching from home. If you do me a favor and repeat the question so the folks at home also.
Or we're just going to have people come up and ask the questions. So actually, Heather, do you mind being the first person to come up and?
Heather does
You're
not
so good at that. We love hearing from you.
Yeah, I know you do. So I'll ask both my questions. They're pretty straightforward. So one is, can people hire charters to heli ski? And then the other one is, if you could talk about tail numbers, are they required? And if they are required to be visible, can you explain what visible means? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you're getting into the rules now. As far as the charter operations, I can't answer the question as to are charter operations coming in and out and dropping people at Alpine. I don't know the answer to that question. We do not allow fixed charter operations out of Alpine Airport. So if there was somebody that wanted to fly 3 whatevers in and out of Alpine and operate out of Alpine, we would not approve that. We would not authorize that.
So picking up at the airport, flying, dropping the Mesquite, Ferry Peak, is that, basically that's what
It's a public use airport. And so from that perspective, they would be able to do that. As to the tail numbers on aircraft, there are specific FAA guidelines for tail numbers on aircraft and helicopters. There are some exemptions. They're very, very limited in scope. There are height number requirements. There's an advisory circular. You can Google it and look up FAA tail number requirements that require certain height and certain width. And that's what everybody who flies fixed wing or rotor wing have to comply with to get their airworthiness certificate, to maintain their airworthiness certificate. That's a requirement. There are some exemptions. Of course, military and whatnot are all exempt. But there are some civilian exemptions, but they're very few by nature.
Any other questions for Raj? If you don't mind, please come up. Oh, yep.
I would just like to know.
Do you mind, sir? Do you mind
Can-
just coming up?
maybe he
Or,
can
yeah,
speak.
we'll, yeah.
I do mind.
No, you'll get over it. You don't have to be that close, but that's all right.
I think one of the things with the helicopters that I wished we could do as far as a courtesy act for the people that live on both sides of the runway, they take off, if they would run down the length of the runway and then gain their elevation and then break off. These guys take off out of right from anywhere in front of your place or whatever. They go up straight across the top of us, and I swear to God, it shakes the inside of the house, and they're not more than 100 feet, if less. They're rude, and they fly over you. They're doing, I know they're doing their circle thing that they have to do and whatever, because I've talked to Lynn about that. But they're really rude. They come in and they just head down on. It's really obnoxious. Thank you.
I think you'll be addressed. We've got him up.
Just ask him, this is a little bit out.
Got it.
Can we use that as well?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
We got people at home that are
I'm sure it's a
watching
question
and-
somebody else is
and,
asking.
can't hear from if it's not pointed out.
I just heard that because there are so few regulations, so few things that you can actually do to make this better, except for a tower. So it's such a small airport, I don't know even what the feasibility is of having a tower. But if a tower would help, takeoff and landing, timing, altitude, patterns once they're in the air, all of that, wouldn't that be awesome?
So I'll respond to that question, having been on the board of other airports, non-towered and towered. Tower operations and tower controllers would be an FAA-funded adventure. We don't take FAA grant money, which is another big level of bigger airport, which if we took FAA grant money, we would probably 10x the type of aircraft operations coming in and out of Alpine. So trust me, you don't
No,
want
that
us
was a
to
good
take FAA
question.
grant money. The reason our operations are so limited is because we don't take FAA grant money. There's no tower, for all those reasons.
he said he'll work the tower for you, Raj.
Now,
Any other questions for Raj? I do want to get to the fire chief while he's here. There may be other questions, Raj, that come up, and if you don't mind staying till the end, you'll listen to public comment. But if there's nothing else, we'll have the fire chief come up and maybe answer a few questions. Is Mike still here? Oh, there he is.
Yes.
Okay.
He's stuck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raj.
Thanks, Raj.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, I'm Mike Vogt. I'm the chief at Alpine Fire District over here. So letting everybody know that it's a volunteer department. I'm the only one that's paid, so a lot of times during the day, I'm about the only one that responds for the first half hour to an hour, because we only have 16 members, Most of them work in Jackson, so we are limited what we can do. Our area is from Etna to Indian Creek to up McCoy to the Elbow to Jackknife. So we have a big area. We have been trying to address concerns with the air park since the eclipse, because when that was going on, we were the hub of it. We were going to have 50-some planes landing. We had the command post at the station, and our biggest worry was not an airplane crash, but basically parking airplane crash with spills and jet fuel, and what are the procedures and plans for containment and spill protection, or how you're going to address that. At what point are you going to have to call the EPA? It doesn't fit under NFPA standards because you're in the county, and the county has not adopted the NFPA codes. So it'd be EPA and DEQ limitations on 25 gallons or like 10 square foot area spread, constant flow, whatever parameters. But, and to tell you the truth, I've been working with Lynn, and he's been real good. Since that time, we have taken tours around there. One of our biggest problems was getting addresses. And a lot of people weren't too concerned about that because they said, well, you'll see if our place is on fire. But our problem was in the middle of the night for somebody's having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just for the fire protection. We've gone around, and again, this has been there for 50 years. We know that. So everybody built around it. One of my biggest concerns is on the west side of the runway because there's no water there. There's no hydrants over there. People thought those ponds would be a good deal. We tried pumping out of those last summer, and they just aren't maintained. That one hydrant is 75 feet away from the water source, so it's almost impossible to get a draft that far, so you got to back water, fill it to get it a draft. And then those ponds aren't maintained, and we were sucking up inch rocks, and that was going to destroy my fire engines. And plus, that would only be a seasonal opportunity for water.
Right.
So we can't get within the 10 feet that we would need to get a proper draft in the wintertime and in the summertime either. So those are kind of out of the questions for being a proper resource for water supply. Now the other side of the runway, they're getting great hydrants over there. And you also have massive buildings over there. So we've addressed that by getting that new $1 million ladder truck. Because we can distribute 1,000 gallons of water with one person now from an elevated source to try and keep that fire hopefully to the building of origin without, getting everything else involved. So some of my concerns working with Lynn was trying to come up with some response plans for different types of emergencies. And we did have an opportunity. I was scheduled to come to your July meeting, but 15 minutes before that call, we had to roll over at Indian Creek that I had to go to. So I missed that time to meet with all you guys. So I had a few of the things that we've been trying to address is, okay, we already kind of covered this, but the spill response. So I had questions about the drain there at the fill station. It has a drain there, but I just wanted to know if it went to the earth or you had a containment. If it spills at the fuel station, there's a drain there, but I don't know if it contains it or just goes to earth. And I worked clearly back then when Scott Cook was handling that, and you got that new fill station, and I was with the state fire marshals that were inspecting that, so I know that's up to date and put in right. What do you have on hand for damming and diking, and what is your procedures? And then at what point do you form a plan, and who's going to initiate it? Because we have some stuff. We have probably 50 gallons of bee foam. We have some absorbent pads. We have some booms, but it just depends on the quantity of that leak. And so we're trying to have a flow chart. If this, then this. If this, then that. Have contact people listed, so like if they have to come, do we have some type, can offload the spilled resource, or can they dig a pit and keep it contained to a pit, drain it off the runway or what have you? Because if we have, say you have a fire of an airplane on that runway is going to be ruined. It's just going to melt that asphalt, and who knows how long you'd be up and running again if the FAA has to come and check everything, just like that plane went off the end of the runway in the winter, 2 years ago. I was kind of flabbergasted because we helped them out of that plane, but then I went to get their luggage. I wasn't even allowed to get their luggage out of there because FAA had to investigate. So I would like to know the rules of FAA too if we have to respond to those situations.
Mike, can I ask you a question on if there was, let's just say, a fire by the main FBO or the building there or whatever, and do you have the foam or whatever you need to fight the fire, or is that provided?
We have probably 50 gallons.
Okay, is that enough to fight a fire?
Depends on how big.
Okay.
If it's a plane that's burning up 500 gallons from his wings, no. But it depends on that too. Is what do you people want me to do? Do you want me to let that just burn out?
Right.
Do you want me to try and pull your planes out of the garages next door and just try to keep the fire to the residents? I mean, we're trying to work on response plans of what do you guys expect out of me, and I'll be able to tell you there's no way. There's only 10 people responding, and we're not ARF certified, and we have limitations, and we can't make our budget or our equipment specific to the air park. That would be like us, we got to have a hazmat truck because Conrad Bishop has all these semis going over Indian Creek, and we have to have equipment for a spill for them, and we have to have special refrigeration for people that might do this. I mean, we can't make specialty stuff. We have to go for what is the majority of the district members. So we do have some damming and diking. We have some buoys, but it just depends on how big. So basically, I kind of wanted to come here to see what your expectations of me are and what I can do to fit some of those expectations. And then a couple of things that I'd like everybody to be aware of: the countywide code red. Me and Lynn talked about this. A lot of you people are out of town a lot of times out of the year. And code red is you register your phone number with the county. So if there's an emergency in the air park, it's like an Amber Alert for everybody. So even if you're not in town, you would know something's going on in the air park. And if it's happening next door, or if it's happening to you, you would get that alert if we initiate it. And they can, the emergency manager can pinpoint the area that they want to alert, and then you guys could get a notification of anything going on there. And it's real simple. You just go to Lincoln County website. It's on the first page. It takes you 5 minutes to fill out some information, and then they'll alert you by the demographics of where the emergency is. So that was another thing that Lynn and I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of so that you could be contacted if something happens in your neighborhood. And then have some type of contact information, like Lynn, we call him a lot, like we get fire alarms or we need to know something, or we're going to tell him we're going to be on the runway for a reason. He basically knows who lives there and stuff, but if he's not around, we'd like to have some person that we can contact to make sure, hey, can you get hold of them, or do you have the code to their house so we need to get their plane out, or what have you. So we do have like 2 pages of gate codes for all this stuff that's over there, and some house codes. So we have been keeping up on being able to get into stuff. Another thing I'd like to have is notification of what addresses have the AvFuel, because we have to be more careful there. So I don't know how many have it at the residence or whatever, but we would like to somehow know going in that it has that more potent fuel. And then another thing, this might be out of bounds and you might think this is crazy, but you guys are also at risk for wildland fire. And that's because you got Reese's or you got Lakeview. If those ever catch on fire and we have these nasty winds coming down the canyon, you're going to have ambers blowing all over your properties. So anywhere you've been planting all those trees and long grasses that you keep, or even if it gets up on, those ambers get on your wooden deck or your wooden siding, you have a potential to have a wildland problem in the air park. So keep that in mind with your landscaping and what time of year, and be aware, because that could easily happen. So that's another thing that Lynn and I have been talking about. And as for enforcing any codes or anything, like I said, there's no codes. You guys are in the county, whether you're building or whether it's an airport or whatever. They just haven't adapted anything yet. So it just has to be done by what is reasonable, because that place scares the hell out of me. You guys have such big buildings and such a fire load, and we just have limited resources. So all I can say is we'll do the best we can and hopefully take care of the problem. But we are aware of it and we are addressing it. And I'll tell you what, that ladder truck's going to make a big difference if we ever have a problem over there, because of what it can do with that much water with just one person, being how we have such limited manpower. So anybody have any questions?
I would just say, first of all, it sounds like some of these concerns that he has come down to communication. And would you be willing to open up whatever communication needed directly to the board? I mean, it sounds like, I know Lynn's doing a great job, but maybe some of those concerns going directly to you. I'm sure Lynn's passing them on, but, you know.
Happy to.
Okay.
Well, the biggest thing is, I don't know what you guys expect out of us. I mean, I don't know if you think that you don't have to worry about anything because we got a fire department and they're going to handle it. I mean, because if it's too big, we're going to try to do the best we can, but we're not going to, hopefully we'll keep it to that building of origin, but you know, I don't know what your expectations are.
Yeah.
So
it goes back to, we need as many volunteers as possible, and I really think we need to try to get another paid position. Maybe it's a assistant chief or something like that, but we need to make sure that our dollars are being spent wisely. I was on the fire board and I helped Mike for a few years, but I know that's the biggest struggle. So does anyone have any questions for Mike while we've got him?
Do any of the people that live at the airstrip volunteer on the fire department?
The question was, do any people on the air park volunteer for the fire department? Mike?
no.
We're going to have a recruitment drive over there, I think.
I have to make one announcement. This man is wonderful. He cares so deeply about what he just mentioned. And we're a little off target with our fundraising to outfit that ladder truck that he's talking about, which actually benefits the air park more than anyone. So I'm just throwing that out there. We'd love a little more participation from the air park.
Yeah, but let's talk about that real quick, Mike. So the truck was $1 million, and now we need to outfit it. And the cost to outfit it is how much?
So, well, here's what's going on. So the truck cost $880,000, so just under $900,000. We got a 70% grant. We came up with $260,000 out of your tax money, and then to get it to meet the NFPA requirements to get into service, we needed $62,000 for 6 air packs. We needed $32,000 for radios, and we needed another $22,000 for hose, and then we needed, I think, another $7,000 just for fittings, valves, and stuff. So it is up and running. We had been putting monies in reserve planning for this, but it just takes time to save that much money, and I'm glad we did it when we did. We ordered it 2 years ago, and when we got it here after the 2 years, they had told me that if we bought it if we just bought it then, it was already $400,000 more. So it's gonna be real valuable. Hopefully we won't need it, but it'd be way better than if we didn't have it, you know. So.
Can I ask you a question, Mike? You said you posed the question about the drain there.
Mm-hmm.
What's the answer to it? Does it just go into the air, the dirt?
Scott couldn't answer it. I don't know. That's what I want to know, because if it goes to earth, buoy needs to go around. We need to protect a spill. And I'm sure you have a containment tray for that tank there if it should get a leak. But my concern has always been if we get a leak in one of your hangars, like you've been gone for a weekend and you come back and you got 100 gallons of jet fuel on the floor. What do you have in means of mitigating it and notification and know my limitations of it? I mean, we have some buoys and some absorbent pads and some foam, but
I guess the question is, what can we put in, like some sort of, I don't know, your response plan if all hell breaks loose out there? Like, are you capable to help? And you don't have to answer now, but I think that's a concern for a lot of the residents around that live close. Like, we can only react so much. What are you going to do to help us mitigate whatever the issue it is?
Basically, predetermined resources. You know, like if it's, 20 gallons, yeah, we can go to the store and get kitty litter, and absorb it. But now you got 500 gallons, and is it getting into one of the ponds? Okay, then that's a bigger problem. If it's getting and sitting on the asphalt, eating the asphalt away. Or if we have to dig a pit to contain it, or if we get a fire, do we put it out or let it burn? Because if we spray 1,000 gallons of water on jet fuel and we don't capture it, then EPA is going to come in and say, we got to come clean up your soil, we got to dig up the runway, we got to shut it down for a while. So these are the things that need to be thought about in hopefully some type of plan.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to clarify, because I didn't want to us versus them, but the air park also contributes to the purchase of the fire truck through taxes.
Yes.
Of course. Yep.
So
Yeah, your mill levy helped come up with
all the
money that we
So
used.
for people at home, the question was basically, or the comment was that the people that live at the air park are also contributing to your mill levy on your property tax pays for the fire district, and so of course your money is going to pay for that stuff as well.
Mike,
other
how
questions?
how does training work? If you have a voluntary, force, how does training work if there's additional asks for them specific to the air park? How does that work? Do they have to go to a dedicated training? Do you have those resources
Depends
at
on what
home?
level, like, we'll go and pre-plan with Lynn, like, if this, like say those ponds don't work. We have the 2 pump houses that he actually changed the fitting so that I could fit my hose onto them if we need to fill up the trucks. So we try to pre-plan of what activity, that's why we're trying to do the response plan. But as for sending somebody to an ARF school, it wouldn't really work because we'd have to come up with probably $10,000 a member to get in the right gear, to get the right foam, to get those shake and bake suits. And it's built for real air parks, not private ones.
Right.
So we have what we can do with 50 gallons of foam. Our training is limited also because of being volunteers.
Right.
They're doing
We
this
have
on
so
their
much
spare
time.
times, and it's like we have to do fire, we have to do wildland fire, we have to do rope rescue, we have to do extrication, we have to do SCBA training, we have to do swift water training. So you can only get so many hours of training
Yes.
for volunteers in a month. So I'm sorry, but we're limited.
Yeah.
So
Any other
to do
questions?
this code red, what kind of training do they have? I've had,
All that is a notification source on your phone, just like an Amber Alert.
so would you show up to help out someplace or whatever?
Oh yeah, we'll already be involved.
They'll be the one issuing the code red through dispatch.
Yeah. So 911 will already be gone and we'll be doing whatever the problem is. But this is to notify a certain area that you got to, like that house that blew up, the propane.
Right.
So it would have let everybody know within whatever the GPS settings was that you wanted. It's like a half mile away around that thing that we could have notified you, hey.
What was that? Well, what was that big boom was the question.
Well,
Yeah.
but also, a quarter mile away is blowing their front doors off. So,
Right.
but it just notifies you if you're out of town, that something's going on.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mike? And then we'll open it up for public comment. We've already had, go ahead.
I've seen other properties in other states where, there's a lot to be protected, where those properties have actually hired off-duty and then sort of staffed their own in order to supplement in rural areas like we are. Would something
Staff
like
them
some
with
sort
what?
of kind of in tandem, well, I knew of a property where they would actually hire then off-duty fire and off-duty officers, paramedics, to come and be on the property, maybe during a particularly busy time, and then that way it gave the local more,
Well, there won't be anybody to hire.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of
It's-
everybody that's driving
that-
Jackson every day.
Well, if they were interested, I could get them, but
Right.
they'd have to have the resource. They'd have to have a truck and equipment.
And they did.
And-
This was all they
and-
invested in
well,
all
that's-
of that.
Big time towns.
Yeah.
like ours.
I'm sorry, we're not there. Yeah.
So are you
Well, I
saying,
don't know
like-
how they possibly could have done that. Because
The property invested, it
Well-
was the property invested. It was a private investment.
Oh, well.
So in this scenario,
Good
you're
luck.
saying the air park, I think the question is, would the air park be willing to hire their own fire department or have their own person on staff just to,
Or their own equipment.
yeah. So anyways, that's a question that will,
That's amongst yourselves.
yeah. Jack, you have another question? Do you mind coming up, please? And so people at home can hear your dulcet tones.
Quick question, following up with that, I was just curious, wouldn't it make sense that you get together with them, if this is a real concern, having a fire there? Shouldn't they have some kind of special fire hydrant and equipment at the air park, like on the runway? So at least when you show up, there's already
Everything's on
some
site.
kind of preventative.
We've discussed that, having stockpiled foam or even, that's exactly what we talked about. I showed them how many booms and what you might need. And
To me, that makes
even
more
having,
sense.
some barrels of absorbent just for the small spills.
I mean, to me, that makes more sense to me, because that way you show up and at least some of that stuff's there.
Mhm.
It seems like a better preventative.
You're not gonna use it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
do you mind? You,
Oh, yeah, I'm done.
so, there's a lot of talk about gas here, and I operate a big FBO in San Diego, so I know a little bit about it, and I know Mike really well. A quick fact, jet fuel is diesel. Same thing, basically almost exactly the same thing, and avgas is gasoline. There's 10 times more fuel sitting at KJ's than there is on the air park. So if there's a problem with a fuel problem, you know, you got KJ's, you got all the other automotive fuel providers, you got diesel trucks that have as much diesel fuel them as airplanes have jet fuel. So this is not a problem that is unique. Now, I operate on a big federal airport where, you know, again, we have 100 times more traffic, and we sell 6 million gallons of jet fuel a year. We don't have any special prepositioned things at my fuel station. The fuel department doesn't do any particular exercises to, you know, fuel. There's NPRM guidelines that you talked about for fuel containment, but in my 20 years, we've never spilled more than 2 gallons. So it's a very, very rare occurrence, even when you're pumping millions of gallons. There is a lot less risk pumping fuel into an airplane when it's usually professional people doing it than there is pumping it in a gas station at the gas station. It's the exact same stuff. So don't hyperventilate about, you know, fuel going into airplanes versus cars. It's the same thing, right?
Yes.
thank you. Any other questions for Mike, and then we'll get right into public comment if anyone has any additional public comments. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it. I'll open it up for public comment. Go ahead.
Yes,
Tell us your name.
Paul.
Yep.
Paul Baker. I'd just like to sort of voice some of the frustration that I think I have, and maybe a lot of other people here have, about the level of noise and disruption that it causes to our life, and the fact that we really didn't have any say in any of this. And I don't think that this came about. This came about because there were decisions made by certain administrative bodies. And this is not the town, but this is the Forest Service, which gave them the lease, the 1,700 feet at the end, which was then forced them to then open it up to the public. That's why we have people coming in, is the use of the lease, correct?
The two are not interrelated.
Well, I have a copy of the special use permit, which I reread today, and it does seem to indicate that.
It is a requirement to have the permit to open it up to the public.
So you could do it if you wanted to, but
Well, from a safety perspective, as I presented earlier, it is safer for the air park, safer for all of our community to have that 1,700 feet, prevent an end of runway overrun that would cause more damage and more harm to people at the end of that runway, and to have that 1,700 feet at the north end, which allows us to displace a little bit of the operations more to the north part of the
right. But if you didn't have that, there wouldn't be any jets coming in, right?
That's not true.
No, no, there'd be jets coming in anyway.
Every jet on airport still uses that way.
Even without just inside of that.
It would just be more dangerous.
It would be a tighter margin.
Okay, so warning. Okay, so then the other part that I have is like with the county, that this I think it was, you know, around 2010, there was this big expansion that they permitted. And that was there any public comment that anybody had about, is this a good idea? Is this good for the community? What do you think about this?
What year was that?
I think it was 2010. So this is really not, this is just, I think, for a larger thing that I want to point out to the community here, that we were just sort of written out of this, and this has direct bearing on us. So
we don't know what happened
Right.
back then. What the
right, we don't know,
county-
but I'm just saying
if
that
they
was,
tried to
they
keep
may
people-
have,
yeah.
and I don't think they have, and I'm reaching out to the Forest Service right now to see if there's any public record, you know, record of any public comment or what their environmental
Is that
impact study.
when it renewed, is that what you're saying?
Right, if
Yeah,
it was
okay.
if we ever had any of that. So I think that, I mean, I hear Rod saying there's not much we could do. There's people come in from out of town. Well, is there anybody that can do anything? Can anybody enforce a noise regulation anywhere? Does the county have one? They don't. Why not? Is this an unreasonable thing to ask? If you want to use public land, is it too much to ask that you may have terms and conditions of use such that you don't leave at 5 o'clock on a Sunday if you're going to use that part of the runway? Is that too much to ask? Right? I mean, so this is not anything that you could deal with. It's just as a public forum here, I feel like some of the frustration we have is that nothing we can do, but you got to sort of suck it up and deal with it. Well, I think maybe as a community, there are some people that we could talk to, namely the Forest Service and maybe the county, and ask them, if you sort of created this problem, maybe you can be part of the solution to help fix it. And so I don't know how that would come about through this body, but I just want to throw that out there to members of the community that might be concerned.
Yep. Well, they're listening. They have one member from the county is here tonight. So, yeah, I'm sure they'll hear it, and we'll just start the conversation. I don't know what can be done. I mean, in the town of Alpine, we have a noise ordinance.
Right.
But to deal with that, I mean, you've got to have the, what's it called, the decibel meter or whatever out and be able to track it. I mean, it's highly, highly unlikely we could ever do anything about like low-flying aircraft making too much noise in the town of Alpine. But it'd be very difficult. So that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I don't know how that would be addressed, but I think if there was anybody who was interested in talking to Tracy Hollingshead, who needs to special use permit, or people at the county about like, why did you permit all this stuff and then really didn't have anything to do with the noise, I think it'd be an interesting conversation.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Heather, come on.
All right. Heather Goodrich. First, I want to say I'm proud of our town. I see most of the people here are longtime residents, full-time residents, so I think we should give our little town a round of applause. The parking lot's packed. I promise I won't be too long. So I do want to talk about the helicopters. They've gotten really bad lately. I feel like the plane traffic has gotten a lot better the last few months. It's amazing what happens when you follow the recommended flight path. It makes living in Alpine so much better. So thank you, pilots who are doing that. It is very noticeable when you do, but the helicopters definitely have gotten worse. My concern right now, the main concern I'm going to talk about, and this is not something the town can address, it's the Forest Service, is wildlife. There has been a study, a guy who studies how airports impact wildlife out of I think it's Boise, I want to say. And it's a dramatic impact, especially in migration patterns. So I think that's something, you talked to Raj about how much y'all love the wilderness here. I really think that's something you should take into account, especially the wilderness study area. It's interesting to me that I can't ride my dirt bike there, but you can fly a helicopter low and flush out moose. I mean, literally, it happens all the time now when I'm up there. So that's the biggest thing I wanted to bring up, is if you could just consider that in this helicopter plan. And I think the Forest Service really needs to do a study. It's been a really long time since they looked at that. I think the only other thing I want to say is I would like to ask the air park people and the pilots to remember that I've heard of this a lot. You moved in next to an airport. What did you expect, right? Well, remember, people have been here for 20 years. I've been here 10 years. This problem has really erupted in the last 5 years. So maybe be a little bit humble and take some feedback. Don't be defensive. So that would be my other request.
Thank you. I will say I think we've made huge strides just getting here. So I applaud everyone here for making the first step. So any other public comment? Sure, go ahead.
I live on West Cottage, right there. I was kind of wondering about the takeoff and landing times. Seems like they're 5 a.m., 10 p.m., I've heard, is one. Like, I'm right there, I hear the private jets take off.
Is there a specific time for?
Hours of operation?
Yeah, hours of operation.
Our recommendation is basically dawn to dusk.
Dawn to dusk, okay.
Okay.
Right, that's what I thought, and I'm hearing them, you know, well after dark, for sure. But like you said, it's a public place. That was one thing. Yeah, the helicopters are kind of ridiculous. They buzz my house. And one thing I take issue with what you said, the airport makes us safer. I don't feel that way when I have helicopters buzzing my house. I mean, how is it safer? Because there's an airport near my house. It just doesn't make sense. You know, you're saying because of what, search and rescue can land there and take off? I mean, fair enough. But it's not like the pilot who died got rescued from the airport. They took him to Afton in a meat wagon. So, I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm saying. And, yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Wendy?
Wendy.
I'm just hearing a lot of people asking, where can we give feedback? And I'd like everyone here to know an email or a phone number that they can call when they have a complaint or an issue.
Yeah, hopefully we get that dialed in really soon, and we will have both. We're going to have this committee. I imagine the whoever's on the committee will be will give their email out. Hopefully, it's an email that's that could be passed on, like our new mayor at Alpine WI. We'll have something that all these different generations of people can still email the same people, and then the chairman of the board should be there, and then a phone number to complain to, of course.
So,
I'm committed to setting that up. That's
Yes,
what we'll do.
yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to have places to complain to or give suggestions in the near future.
and currently, if someone wants to complain, where do they send an email or a call?
On our website, you can send it to.
The Alpine Air Park website.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
I guess I'd like to follow that up with, be it your HOA or the other HOAs. As an HOA member, do you guys have any enforcement if one of your members are doing something inappropriately that you as an HOA fine that HOA member?
Raj, do you mind getting on the microphone, please? Thank you.
From an air park perspective, we don't have an enforcement mechanism.
Okay.
We do not have an enforcement mechanism.
You are the
Every
only
member.
HOA I know that doesn't have an enforcement
Well, every member is required to comply with the rules as being a member, and there are certain requirements of which I've described today. That's basically what we can do, and reach out to the members, pilots, and
Gotcha.
communicate with them. Individual HOAs in the air park that regulate the housing side of it, they may have enforcement rules
Right.
that I'm not aware of.
Gotcha.
Raj, if you had a few bad actors that were consistently breaking your own rules, would you turn them into the FAA?
I would not.
Okay. So who would be doing that?
That would
Individuals?
That would be between the FAA and whoever is, whatever the bad actor function is, between them and the FAA.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I were to get on Flight Aware and look and notice this bad actor who continually is not following the unenforceable guidelines, how do I contact the FAA? I just send them that information myself? Is that the best way to do that?
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah. So I think, you're going to go to the FAA website, and I'm sure there's a place to make
File a complaint.
I'm sure you can call them too, but to form a complaint.
Okay.
So
And maybe this committee we form will also be able to do that on behalf of
what
people
I
who
would
complain?
like the committee to do is put together a fact sheet. Basically, these are the people you can contact. These are some of the things that, if there are bad actors, or these are the things, here's the information for the FAA. If you want to track a flight, go to FlightAware. That should be one of the first things they do, is get a flyer together with as much information on it as possible, and then that could be disseminated to community members or be right on their website or whatever.
Okay, thanks.
I would hope that can happen, but. Any other public comment?
My name is Teresa Misetti, and I've lived in this area pretty much all my life, and the noise is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. The jets at 5 o'clock in the morning, the treetop flying helicopters that we call about, and and it's the same of people. And, even before we had this version of the air park, EMS always got in here. They would land. They would come and pick people up and take them over to Ermac. Air Idaho would come over. It wasn't like a big deal. It's unpleasant to live here. And the jet fighter planes, the 4th of July that disrupt everything, and the animals that go, the moose that go running through my yard because of it, and it's just not the life that we've known for so long in these last 10 years, especially these last 4 or 5 years. It's, 5 o'clock in the morning, you can't even sleep in the summertime with your windows open because these, jets fly in now that we never had this before. So I didn't move here knowing there was an air park here. The air park came here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Patricia McQuaid. I live in Alpine Meadows. I'd like to ask, there's certainly a lot of noise from the airplanes. This past Saturday afternoon, there were cars that had to be racing on the runway. There was like an hour and a half. They couldn't possibly have been on the roads. They had to be on the runway. They were very loud. And I'm just wondering, is that an accepted use of the runway?
Yeah, do you mind?
So
Do you mind actually, that's a good question. Thank you, Raj.
We did allow a car event this weekend, and they were on the runway.
And, okay, so how often can we expect that to happen? Just whenever you want?
It's pretty infrequent. I would think a modern-day automobile, is a lot quieter than a helicopter and an airplane.
They were up and down the runway, back and forth.
I wasn't here, so I don't.
Okay, well, I can tell you, I was sitting on my porch hoping to enjoy a lovely September afternoon, and it was not enjoyable. So I certainly don't want, it's bad enough airplanes, but we don't need, cars racing back and forth on the runway. I find that unacceptable.
Thank you, Raj.
And then my other comment is just because of this, because of other things, I know that a moratorium has been suggested, that the town take some time. There's multiple issues that I think the council is being pressured to make decisions that are terribly significant to the town for the next number of decades, that you're being pressured to make decisions too quickly without all the information. So I do think master plan is most needed, and I think that you really need to take more time for some of these decisions. I know there's 2 developments that are outside of town that previous administrations granted, sewer and water hookups. So we've got, I know it has to be over 300 between one south and one north town, which we have to give them water and sewer, whether they're in or out of the town.
So I will say that's being investigated. We have legal counsel. It's a 56-page development agreement So we're just making sure that we do all of our due diligence
Well,
on our end.
I'm just saying, yes, I think you need to take all the time necessary.
Right.
So that down the road, we're not looking at promises that were made years ago that we have to fulfill. So,
We hear you. Thank you very much for your comment.
And Pat, you come to every single meeting.
Yes, she's
So
been to
if
every
anybody
meeting
knows,
I've-
it's Pat.
She gets the gold star
She
for
does, for
attendance.
attendance.
Richard, yeah, please.
My name's Richard Jenkins, been here 49 years. Friend Bill Kibbe built that airport, the airstrip. He owned 450 acres out there, and he developed it very slowly. And it was always fun when his Learjet showed up on Friday, every Friday, and left every Monday morning. And it was just exciting. So I'm here to say that we all grew up around that airport. We all knew what it was there for. It helped build Alpine. Bill Kibbe built and donated a good bit of the property in Alpine and was a great supporter of our town and our community. And the people at the airport now are also a great supporter of our community. And all I hear is complaints about noise and this and that. Folks embrace the fact that they have helped make Alpine what they are, and we all need to be a little bit tolerant. I personally, they fly over my house every day, and I love it. And I just check my FlightAware and say, oh, I know who that is. That's kind of cool. There you go.
I will also say that for all the negative comments we get tons of positive comments as well. And when I go around and ask people, people say, "Oh, I love the around 4th of July, the jets, or whatever." So just to kind of show the other side, there's a lot of people that are supportive of that and love looking up and seeing the planes. So, and I agree with Richard. They've been here for 50 years, and there's a huge support, and they do bring a lot of business, and they've donated a lot to the town. So I'm here to thank them for what they've done as well. But any other public comments? Please.
Hi, my name is Matt Perkins. I am a Alpine resident in the air park. And I think the first thing I'd like to share with you guys is we're not all millionaires and billionaires. Some of us are just normal people who fly airplanes and love it and have done it since they were younger. And it's kind of been their dream to be an Alpine. I spent my summers with my grandfather fishing in a tin boat by the dam. And so I've been up here my whole life. I'm from Pocatello, Idaho. And I very much enjoy the town. And I do, in my flying, my best to respect the town and respect the residents of the town and follow the guidelines. And I take it a step further. I also talk to folks at the air park who may have done something unintentional or intentional, but most likely it's unintentional from what I've seen, and disrupted the town. So I think there should be some perspective that there might be 2 billionaires at this air park, and the rest are more normal people. And I would encourage you guys to not put a they, them, or us versus them camp out there, because most people there are approachable. And I think one thing that I've really been passionate about with Alpine is trying to invite the townspeople to come and join us at the air park and see it as a shared resource and not as an individual, we own something that you don't have access to. It's truly a public resource. If anyone ever buys an airplane and wants to tie it down there, lives in town. I mean, my first airplane was $60,000. It sounds like a lot. It was a lot for me. I spent all the money I had on it, and I still have it today, and I still fly it, and it was manufactured in Afton, Wyoming. So I just think that kind of hearing the comments in the background and what people are saying, there's more to the story than you think, and I would encourage you to come be part of what is a piece of your community and join us, and not have it in your mind that we're somehow different. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comment? Last chance. Well, I want to thank everyone that came. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Dee, for coming.
Did Mike
and
already leave?
I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry. Thank
Mike,
you, Mike,
Mike's still
for
here,
coming.
and the committee members of the concerned residents. I think this is a great first step, and appreciate your letter that sent kind of sparked all this. So without it, we probably wouldn't be here. So thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing where we can go next with this. So, Jack, one more thing.
I was just gonna ask Mike, when's the fundraiser?
They're always.
I mean, when you have it every year,
Not since COVID.
Yeah.
It's been a little busy.
Can't get enough people that want to do it.
Yeah.
Sue always has a boot that is willing to take hard, cold cash.
People really enjoy the event.
Back with Richard, and we got to be roasting the pig, and we couldn't get people to that, and we order a pig, and then we can't get anybody to gather, serve people, and gather stuff for auctions, and it's just too labor intensive for it.
So I've been begging around town.
I know. When I ask the members, it's like, we don't have time.
We're far from our goal, so I just.
Yeah. How much short are we on our goal right now, Mike?
We have raised $72,000.
And we need to raise how much to outfit the truck?
Well, we spent $400,000.
Right. So we're still north of, let's just say we need to raise over $300-some thousand still to get it properly equipped.
And I haven't had the time with the air park that I would have liked, and Lynn Ferguson was great in sending out emails, but
Yeah.
I really wanted to be here tonight to bring that home, the airport benefits more than anything.
Yeah. We need volunteers. We need, it'd be great. It's a lot of work, but getting the auxiliary up and going again. I know COVID really kind of shut everything down, but we're here to support you. So.
Well, it'd be nice too if we had more than just Lynn as a liaison for information, from the perspective of the pilots or the residents. So if we could work with Lynn.
Yeah. I think we're going to work on that. I think we're going to really be able to open up all the
Contact
communications.
list.
So, anyways, well, with that being said, thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate you being here. So, and we'll adjourn the meeting.